There's also a tendency to criticize. Is there kind of similar to Venus in Capricorn? There might be a tendency to criticize things, be a little more judgmental. It's a little more stronger probably in Venus in Virgo, because Virgo can be nitpicky. If the person hasn't awoken in terms of appreciation, really, um, what value really is, they might start they project it on to onwards to other people. So Venus in Virgo gets pedantic. I used to be a lot more like that, always correcting things, correcting people, wanting to be right. Again, if your Venus is Virgo but your Sun is Leo, there might be a tendency to make yourself kind of like not only the center of attention, but like I have to be right. Capricorn also and Sun might also affect that, because it's like there's that Virgo thing there. It's a perfectionism sort of sign. It's purity. Perfectionism is purity, but purity again is not outside of us. Purity is within us, right? So I've learned to really see those. Oh, okay. It's about owning your sacredness. I believe that Vesta is conjunct my North Node. Vesta has kind of like become more conscious for me, where Vesta is in this case sacred purity, really working through the things that really mean more than just value what I value in myself. So, because Vesta was in Leo, my son was in Virgo, and my son was in Libra, and Pluto is conjunct that. Comes off more. It becomes more about understanding how to work with what is sacred in myself, specifically in my body, because my Vesta was in the first house. Anyways, we're not here for Vesta, but Vesta is, I think Vesta is a ruling planet also for Virgo. It can be. Again, we don't know. I think Vesta is not completed its cycle throughout the signs, so it has to be observed. Venus in, just looking at the time here. Venus in Libra, I mentioned before. Venus in Libra, people love to. There's sort of criticism, but more like on yourself. Venus in Libra love to love. Venus in Libra love to be in love, love to be connected with people, love to relate with people. Can't get enough of that social thing. Depends again on the placement. If your Sun is in Cancer, or let's say your Moon is in Cancer, your Sun is in Cancer, but your Venus is in Libra. There's no tie to that. If your Sun is in Taurus, Venus is in Libra, depends. You kind of have more Libra trait to that Taurus sort of Sun self. But yeah, so Venus in Libra love to kind of always have harmony with relationships, with things they have. They're not much about things, but more like what it means for relationships. So if someone gives them something, they really appreciate that, especially if that person they're connecting with is someone they consider like close to them. Venus in Libra also love to save money. It pleases them to keep things for themselves, kind of just like not to spend too much, because they want to make sure that it's worth. When Venus in Libra is in a relationship, though, there might be tendency to spend a little bit more because they care about the person. Okay. For me, it's more practical because I have it in Virgo. So, flip this. So Venus then in Scorpio is like my mom. Venus in Scorpio is the opposite of Venus in Taurus, where it's control. Venus in Virgo and Scorpio now gets darker. Venus in Scorpio they want to be in control of relationship. They want to have that stability, that trust that's like hidden in everything that's Scorpio. Scorpio just wants you to trust them. And if you don't, it comes out in different ways, right? Like you don't want to talk to them, you don't relate with them. They want to be in control, knowing that you trust them. It's this very Scorpio thing. It's like, even if I sting you, which I won't because it depends on how you relate to me. That's the control thing. It's kind of like instead of taking in control, Scorpio, if the Scorpio person is unawakened, you're still unconscious, which is, I find, might not happen often. I don't know. I'm not really sure. My experience, many Scorpios are more aware of themselves, um, especially when their placement, the Pluto placement, isn't a more. Let's say Pluto was in Pisces, for example. It kind of adds to that theory, but it kind of there might be delusional things that might happen. So anyway, so Venus in Scorpio can be, because of the control, if there's no trust there, specifically from the person they're trying to control, then they'll feel like, oh, what's this? I don't understand. Like, I'm not in control. I'm not in possession of you. So in this case, the possessiveness, the possession, the owning, the esteem, the value of what you own becomes kind of like, it has a darker side to it. But that darker side doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means that Venus and Scorpio have to let go of power. They have to learn how to let go of power in relationships. They have to learn how to realize that the value that they find in power comes from inner power. How am I having, similar to Libra, where it's like, you have to find what is true for yourself. Can you be in a relationship with yourself? Are you okay with being by yourself? Especially with Venus in the social more positive signs, the fire and the air signs. Venus wants to relate in that case, right? Wants to connect with you. Even Taurus, possibly. But Venus in Scorpio has to learn that, has to have that relationship with itself and say, I can be okay with that. It's not that it's not okay with by itself. In fact, it is. But sometimes there's resentment. There's vindictiveness. Venus in Scorpio can be vengeful. Yeah. So I have to be careful about that. Okay, so here's the second batch. Some more oil. So Venus now goes into Sagittarius. Venus and Sagittarius people love to be, they get pleasure from adventure. They get pleasure from knowing through experience, being out there. They're not really for actual connecting with people directly, like love, like it's not romantic. It is, it can be, but it comes after, when they realize that the person that they talk to, people they relate to, things that they have, gives them a sense of like, it's like, it feels like it's a lot of adventure. There's a lot of the optimistic side. Their Jupiter comes out, and they're like, wow, this is really cool. I can actually learn from this. It helps me with growth. It helps me with expansion. It helps me to feel like I can, trust where I am. Not that they don't trust anything. Like Sagittarian people actually have a lot of trust, a lot of optimism, right? It's trust, but it's also optimism in a way that's like, sorry, that thing that I have to ice my fingers down. Anyways, Venus in Sagittarius also finds pleasure in just being out there. They're the ones that kind of can't stick out. They can't sit. They can't stand by. They also might want they also probably will defend relationships or people that they care about. They fight for the underdog, pretty much like the fire signs, specifically Aries and Sagittarius. They will do that. My dad has Venus and Aries, right? Like I mentioned, so he fights for people he cares about, like his family. So, Venus and Sagittarius also kind of feels like they philosophize things. They kind of exaggerate as well. There's a sort of exaggerative sort of thing because of the optimism sort of like energy. Just like they trust people easily. It's all very similar to Pisces, but Pisces is different in a certain way. So then Venus in Capricorn, my sister has this placement. Venus in Capricorn will relate to you when it's more about practical things, when you can talk about things that are practical and you relate to people, or they get drawn to people who are hardworking, disciplined, independent, self-reliant. But of course, they have to watch out for um, if Venus is if that Venus in Capricorn, um, they tend to kind of like close in, and they don't have no they don't they have an earthly it's matter, right? So they become more in contact with relationships and the emotions behind relationships, or the value of it. It's still emotions, by the way. Venus is still emotion, but it's more about the pleasure, earthly emotion. So Capricorn kind of fits right into that. It's you understand that. But what happens is that sometimes when they need to be gentle, they need to be like more empathetic. They have to learn how to do that. But they kind of come up stubborn like Taurus, where they just want to give their opinion. Again, depending on placement. If you have Venus in Capricorn, but also Mercury in Capricorn, they're in conjunct, or Capricorn, and then you have Mercury in Virgo. Oh, you get very critical with people. Well, you can learn to relate with people easily. It becomes sort of a natural thing. You relate with people easily, but there's a tendency to also kind of be more critical and criticize, pedantic, and at the same time very stubborn about it. What's that word for it? I'm looking for it to describe Capricorn. It's very like, I know this is right. This is practical. I don't know anything else, but this is right. That's what makes it stubborn. It carries on. Remember the signs from previous signs. A sign that comes later in the zodiac, they carry on traits from other signs before them. So it kind of has a stubborn streak of like put my foot down kind of thing, like specifically from Scorpio and the other signs, of course, but typically because it's closer to Scorpio than any other sign. But also Sagittarius, right, carries on that belief in itself. It has a certain belief. Venus, in this case, Venus in Capricorn has a certain belief in it. The relationship that has to work this way or otherwise, it's nothing else.